My parents encouraged me to forgive my brother for his infidelity with my ex-wife and the pregnancy. They then requested that I financially support them. My wife, Amy 26F, cheated on me with my brother, Jake 26M, which is why 34M just divorced. My family did chose them over me, and it did happen. However, karma had other ideas. To help you understand how my entire life culminated in this terrible betrayal, let me start at the beginning. Jake was born when I was 8 years old. I was always the golden child growing up in suburban Boston. In the eyes of our parents, Robert 58M and Sarah 56F, I appeared to vanish. Although they were not extremely unpleasant, I was obviously treated as an afterthought. Throughout our childhood, we were often reminded of this truth. I can still remember winning my first science fair in 6th grade. I spent months developing a working model of solar system dynamics, complete with orbital computations and rotating planets. The judges awarded me first prize and a special commendation for mathematical correctness. Jake had t-ball practice, not a game, thus my parents did not attend the ceremony. Jake's participation ribbons covered the walls of our living room, and my award sat on the mantel untouched for a week before disappearing into the basement. This shaped our entire childhood. Jake's C+ grades were applauded, but my straight A's were met with distracted nods. My mother was initially concerned that Jake would feel negatively about his regular classes as a result of my enrolling in the advanced placement program. Jake received a new car for his 16th birthday to boost his confidence, according to his father, whereas I had to start working part-time at 16 to save money for college and buy my own clothes. Graduating from high school was really challenging. Instead of hearing me graduate and deliver my valedictorian speech, my parents spent the whole of the ceremony shooting Jake playing in the stands when he was only 10 years old. Jake complained about being bored, so they didn't hear me announce my MIT scholarship. A celebratory dinner for Jake's early baseball season was turned into a party. Because Jake looks sad about all of your accomplishments, Mom even advised me to tone down. Is my portrayal of my college plans. Jake had recently made the junior baseball team, so I hadn't realized I'd been admitted to MIT on a half scholarship. That's good, honey, but did you hear Jake might be a starting pitcher next season? I recall Mom saying so. At that point, I realized that nothing I had done before would suffice. I acted as Jake's practice child and test subject in their true parenting venture. With my scholarship, the money I gathered from 3 part-time jobs, and the determination to never look back, I left for MIT age of 18. Jake had a summer league game the day I moved into my dorm room, so my parents left early. They didn't even help me with unloading. These were life-altering college years. For the first time ever, I was evaluated solely on my own merits. After recognizing my talent for software architecture, I engaged myself in computer science and graduated with honors. Several businesses expressed interest in my distributed systems optimization undergraduate thesis, and by the time I finished, I had received 5 job offers. A part of me still believed that things would change, so I chose a promising company in Boston, partly because it was close to home. Within 2 years, I was leading my own development team, and by the 5th year, I had become the company's youngest senior developer. My parents were too busy supporting Jake with his 3rd college major change to fully comprehend what I did for a living. The genuine turning point in my life occurred 4 years ago, in a small coffee shop near my employment. Amy and I met there. While pursuing her teaching degree, she worked as a barista. She somehow remembered each regular's order as well as a personal trait. She admitted that she had been writing encouraging notes on my coffee cups for weeks before she agreed to go out with me. I hadn't noticed because I was so concentrated on my assignment. We spent 6 hours on our first date. We talked about everything, including our families, fears, and dreams. She appears to genuinely understand my family's concerns. When I told her about my early years, she said they're blind. They had no concept what they were missing. I felt as though I was being seen for the first time. The following year felt surreal. We made expensive meals together. I spent weekends exploring Boston's hidden bookstores and going trekking in New Hampshire. She encouraged me to apply for a huge promotion at work, helped me prepare for interviews, and celebrated my accomplishment more than anybody else. When I asked her to marry me after 14 months, she shed happy tears, stating she had hoped I would. At the time, I thought our wedding was small and ideal. My family spent the entire reception discussing Jake's new job possibility in California. Mom interrupted Amy's father's toast to show everyone a text message from Jake about his 2nd interview. In retrospect, I should have seen it as a warning sign, but Amy laughed it off, saying she thought their commitment to Jake was beautiful. Our marriage was everything I had hoped for in 3 years. We began talking about establishing a family, bought a nice condo in Cambridge, and took trips whenever we could. I'm bringing home something I never had as a child by adorning it with images from our travels and establishing a little container garden on our balcony. We were a team, she constantly asserted. she would remark, us against the world. Then Jake got in touch last year, after failing to succeed in California due to the startup culture not being his vibe. He returned to Boston. He wrote me a lengthy email in which he expressed his longing for his older brother and his desire to mend our relationship after growing up. He wrote, "Family should stick together." After a week of contemplation, Amy urged me to give him a chance. "People evolve," she stated. "Perhaps they've come to terms with their losses." I decided to go out to supper with Jake against my better judgment. Although awkward, the first meeting showed promise. Jake seems to have grown up and become more self-aware. He stated he wanted to make atonement and acknowledged that he had it easy as a child. A week later, I introduced him to Amy, and they clicked right away. Too well, as I would learn later. Everything appeared to be ideal at first. A couple of times a week, Jake would stop by for dinner. He seemed genuinely interested in my work, brought wine and entertained us with tales of his exploits in California. He even stood up for me when our parents began showing their customary partiality at Sunday dinners. In fact, I began to think that we might be biological brothers. Subtly, however, things began to change. Jake started unexpectedly visiting our home, sometimes while I was still at work. While she graded papers, Amy stated they were simply hanging out, and that it was good too. He would remain for supper and use my coffee mug while chatting with my wife and making inside jokes. I chose to overlook the warning signs, which included their sudden silence when I walked into a room, Amy's phone abruptly turning to the side when I sat next to her, their knowing glances at dinner, and their coincidental meetings at the coffee shop or grocery store. The announcement of the pregnancy followed. We were eating dinner at home. Naturally, Jake was present when Amy broke the news. Although I was ecstatic, Jake's response ought to have told me everything. He was not in the least bit surprised. Rather, he smiled with a knowing satisfaction that made my stomach flip. Jake was there all the time after that. He would talk about how active he would be in our child's life, touch Amy's stomach without asking, and make remarks about the baby's future. Despite my efforts to organize a romantic baby moon trip, hubby inadvertently invited himself, he said. The baby needs both of us, and Amy concurred. I still remember the night I found out. I had been lying awake, mentally reliving months of dubious events. Amy was on the nightstand charging her phone while she slept peacefully next to me. I had never once looked at her phone in our 6 years together. I was a believer in trust and privacy. But I had a need to know something. They had hundreds of communications dating back 6 months. While I was at work, we had secret meetings in hotels. Plans for their future together. Conversations about the infant, their infant. Soon after he returned to my life, they had begun sharing a bed. They had intended to tell me after the baby was born, assuming that I would be too attached to the child to leave, therefore the pregnancy wasn't an accident. I felt my world come crashing down, message by message, as I read every single message till dawn. I was seated in our reading chair with Amy's phone in my hand when she woke up. She was immediately aware of what I had found. She sobbed, "We didn't intend for this to occur." Jake and I simply clicked. He knows me better than you ever could. In fact, she spoke the most overused phrase in the history of affairs. We were going to tell you, but we didn't want to worry you after I became pregnant. I called my parents that morning in the hopes that they would finally support me. I was astounded by their answer. Mom said, "Jake made a mistake, but he's going to be a father now. You must forgive him and act like the bigger person. Consider the infant. Consider the grandchild that was produced when their younger son was having an affair with the wife of their older son. They were also protecting him, once more. There are some things that never change." That day, I called a divorce attorney and checked into a hotel. Amy took turns pleading for my pardon and condemning me for deserting our family. At work, Jake attempted to corner me by claiming that we needed to have a man-to-man conversation. I reported him for workplace harassment and had security escort him out. Going through a divorce was a nightmare. Amy and Jake claimed their affair started because of my emotional unavailability, portraying me as domineering and emotionally abusive. According to my parents' testimony, I had always been difficult and had lifelong jealousy of Jake. Mom even blamed the mediator for the entire problem, saying that I should have been more considerate of Jake's demands. After that, I stopped negotiating. After we went to court, Amy managed to get a respectable settlement. It seems that in Massachusetts, having an affair with your husband's brother does not waive alimony. Small successes, though, like preserving the condo and the majority of my pay. I am currently 34 years old, divorced and totally estranged from my family. I've changed my email, blacklisted their numbers, and told building security to never let them in. On certain days, I find myself questioning whether there is any way I could have avoided this, if I'd been a better spouse, brother, or son. However, I later realized that I wasn't the one who deceived everyone. Turning family against family was not something I did. It said that everyone eventually experiences karma. I'm not sure if that's accurate, but I do know that I'm sick of being the family's scapegoat. Having to be understanding when everyone else gets away with ruining lives is something I'm tired of. I've lived my entire life as the one who has passed over, the second best option, and the afterthought, no more. However, just when I believed that things couldn't get much worse, they were about to get even more bizarre. Update 1. I assumed my family would finally leave me alone when I stopped communicating with them after the divorce. About a month has passed since everything happened, and I've been making an effort to concentrate on getting better and moving on. However, it seems that they had different ideas. When our office receptionist messaged me yesterday morning while I was in the middle of an important meeting with my development team, she said that my mother Sarah was in the lobby and insisted on seeing me. She reportedly spent more than an hour there, telling everyone she just needed to talk to her son. Since my team had seen Jake's prior incident at work, they could tell how uneasy I was. After ignoring her and carrying on with my job, my phone began to ring with calls from unidentified numbers. It seems that my mother had enlisted a number of family members to attempt to contact me. I thought it might be work-related when I finally answered one phone, but it was my Aunt Linda, 54F, with whom I hadn't spoken in years. Not even bothering to say hello. She began, "Your brother and Amy are really struggling. Jake still hasn't found a job, and the settlement money is running low. Well, no one wants to hire him after that. Jake's reputation appears to have been ruined by his affair with Amy, which somehow made its way into his professional network. After doing background checks, a number of prospective employers withdrew their offers. I couldn't help but notice the irony. For once, his actions had tangible repercussions. This is where it becomes ridiculous, though. In addition to purchasing groceries and paying their rent, my parents have also been paying for Amy's prenatal medical expenses. My father's retirement funds are being depleted, and they are now in a panic as they run out of money themselves. Their remedy. They want to strisk me asterisk to provide financial assistance for the woman who deceived me and the brother who ruined my marriage. My mother didn't just show up at my office, she had a plan. She chose to ambush me at work since she knew I wouldn't return their calls. After threatening to stay until closing time, she launched into a prepared speech on forgiveness and family responsibilities when I eventually made my way down to the lobby to handle the problem. She easily forgot that I had to pay for my own college education when she remarked, "Your father and I have always provided for both our sons. It's time for you to take charge and support your brother during this difficult time." What I was hearing was unbelievable. A rough patch. My wife became pregnant after he had an affair with her, and he attempted to claim the child as his own. That is a purposeful set of decisions. Not a tough stretch, she foolishly responded, "Well, if you had paid more attention to Amy's needs." Before calling security, I interrupted her and begged her to leave. Before she went, I made a loud announcement in the lobby that I was leaving behind my own brother and his pregnant child. Despite their support, several of my coworkers considered this to be degrading. Jake wrote me an email later in the evening. To get over my blocks, he created a new account. The communication included half-hearted apologies and barely disguised appeals for financial assistance. He wrote about Amy's pregnancy complications, which I was ignorant of, how they were unable to pay for necessary medical treatment, and how the stress affected my future nephew or niece. Despite the fact that the editing techniques were obvious, the attachment, a sonogram image, attracted my interest the most. They were emotionally attacking me with their unborn child, the product of their affair. In an attempt to try a new approach, my father appeared at my apartment complex the next day and pretended to be there merely to talk. I refused to let him in when the front desk called. Then, for 2 hours, he stood in the lobby, telling everyone who would listen how his successful kid was bringing his brother's family grief. Since then, I've had to notify the management of my building about the situation and request that none of my family members enter, even if it is awkward to express my private issues in public. I don't see any other option. Furthermore, the harassment has expanded on social media. Amy has been making vague claims against me on Facebook, saying that her emotionally incapable spouse abandoned her during her pregnancy. Jake has been reposting these posts, adding his own comments on how some individuals must step up and accept responsibility. He appears to be ignorant of the irony in talking responsibility while appealing for freebies. I find it frustrating how they've twisted this story. They paint myself as the evil guy because I did not provide for the people who tricked me. They appear to assume that I have a responsibility to save them from their own mess, merely because I am successful professionally. I started keeping track of everything, including emails, work concerns, and social media posts. According to my lawyer, if they try anything legal, we may need it. She is especially concerned that they will try to utilize the judicial system to gain additional assistance. What is the worst thing? I've received letters from family, friends, and distant relatives telling me to prioritize family and be a better person. They don't seem to comprehend Jake and Amy have devastated my sole surviving family. Despite my staunch commitment not to assist them, the constant pestering is wearing me down. To cope with all of this, I've been seeing a therapist, and I'm considering looking for a new work in a different location. Although I dislike the concept of fleeing, I am at a loss for what to do to achieve peace. My own family has sunk to a level I never expected, but here we are. They aren't just appealing for help, they're trying to intimidate and pressure me into providing money to the same people who ruined my life. I have a sense that this is not over yet. Desperate people do desperate things, and they are becoming increasingly desperate. Update 2. My former partner's attorney unexpectedly sent me a notification. Jake and Amy attempted to sue me for further support, citing greater medical demands and altered circumstances. My lawyer, who had been documenting all of their harassing instances, was outraged but prepared. Last week was the scheduled court date. It was surreal to enter that courtroom. Amy was dressed to emphasize her evident pregnancy. Our parents sat just behind them, looking smug and pompous, with Jake sitting behind her in our father's old suit. There. Lawyer came first. She shared a story that almost made me laugh. They stated that because they underestimated the emotional cost of the divorce, the original payment was insufficient. They claimed that my habit of workplace harassment had stopped Jake from obtaining work, and even hinted that the stress produced by my vengeful behavior was jeopardizing Amy's pregnancy, which reportedly required specialized care due to high-risk factors. My lawyer's response was heartbreaking. She began by screening surveillance footage from my office building, which showed my mother, Jake's angry behavior and Amy's efforts to enter through the back entrance. She then produced social media evidence, including a detailed timeline of their campaign of online harassment. Their financial records were the real surprise. Jake had turned down several jobs as being beneath him, not because he was having difficulty finding work as a result of my pestering. Amy had declined a full-time teaching position to maintain her jobless, pregnant status, much to the court's dismay. The most incriminating evidence was a completely healthy pregnancy with typical expenses. They'd been playing pawn with their unborn child. The judge was visibly agitated. When their counsel tried to convey that their mental distress required additional assistance, the court interrupted him. Your clients appear to have committed perjury, counselor. Do you want to continue moving in this direction? Following a brief break, their lawyer returned with a gloomy demeanor. Jake was pale, Amy was crying, and their united front had collapsed. I was pleasantly surprised by the judge's ruling. In addition to dismissing their request, he reduced my alimony payments by 60%. This court does not look lightly upon parties who abuse the legal system, he stated. Mr. Smith appears to be the victim of a well-thought-out conspiracy to abuse him financially and emotionally. The repercussions occurred soon. Amy decided she could work after Jake suddenly found a job in retail. In their final message, my parents blamed me of sabotaging Jake's last chance and promised that they would never forgive me for abandoning my family. Their attorney quit from representing them due to fundamental issues regarding veracity. My organization strengthened security and excluded them from the premises. My parents had taken out a second mortgage to pay for legal fees, and Jake and Amy were often battling about money, according to mutual acquaintances. I finally feel like I can breathe. Thanks to fewer expenses, I can restore my savings. I'm considering accepting a job offer in Seattle. Allowing someone to experience the consequences of their actions is sometimes the most effective form of retaliation. However, I have a hunch that this story is not over. Update 3. I'd like to start by thanking the community. Thanks to your encouragement and comments, I've managed to stay strong during this ordeal. Here is what could be my story's final update. Aunt Linda, my father's sister, unexpectedly approached me a few weeks after the court success. I was interested enough to listen to her because she had never been involved in a family conflict. A tremendous mistake, she began, trying to seem alarmed. Your father isn't getting any younger, his health is deteriorating as a result of all the stress. She went on to discuss how my parents would lose their retirement savings, how they would have to refinance their home to cover Jake and Amy's expenses, and how families should stick together no matter what. She shifted tactics when I didn't react with sympathy soon away. Did you know that every night your mother sobs herself to sleep? Even if they acted badly against you as a youngster, they are still your parents. Jake remains your brother, despite everything that has happened. Finally, I cut her off. What happened? Are you talking to the months he spent having sex with my wife, making her pregnant, and then attempting to claim the child as his own? That's what happened? I was startled by her reply. Perhaps you could have been more engaged in your marriage. In fact, she attempted to blame me for their affair, alleging that my childhood jealousy of Jake created a toxic environment that pushed them together. It was so ludicrous that I actually laughed. Another member of the family was attempting to trick me into assuming responsibility for Jake and Amy's actions. What's the difference this time? It did not move me at all. Linda, I questioned, why don't you help them if you're so concerned about their financial situation? Your husband's legal firm is thriving, and you own 3 rental houses. Why am I the only one who is expected to stand by them? That was different, she spat, adding that I had a unique obligation as Jake's brother. She said she didn't want to choose sides when I asked her why she hadn't stepped in during all of this. But now you're picking sides, I responded. You decided to come to me and demand that I pay for their consequences rather than admit the harm they caused. She then exposed what she thought was her hidden weapon. Your father is thinking of retiring early because of stress. The house may need to be sold. Is seeing your folks lose everything because you're too proud to assist what you want, I said. No, Linda. They're losing everything as a result of their decision to condone Jake's actions once more. They, like Jake and Amy, are paying the price for their own decisions. And what do you know? I'm not responsible for fixing that. When I'm older and alone. Family is all we have in the end, she emphasized, threatening that I will regret this. No, I replied. Self-respect is all we have in the end, and I'm finally choosing to keep mine. In addition to blocking her number, I hung up. Her call, however, had the unanticipated benefit of providing me with clarity. I felt truly free for the first time from the obligation and guilt that had plagued me since I was a young child. I accepted the Seattle job offer later that day. The change of location feels appropriate, and the firm is providing a substantial promotion. I'm starting over and selling the condo. Yesterday, my coworkers threw me a farewell party. I learned what true support looks like from these individuals who supported me during the darkest months of my life. With the straightforward statement, "Your worth isn't determined by those who couldn't see it," my closest colleague gave me a card that was signed by everyone. I've discovered that family is about mutual support, respect, and trust rather than blood. The friends who supported me, the co-workers who shielded me, and ultimately myself, proved to be my true family. I'm done. To my parents, Jake, Amy, and now Linda. Your decisions brought you to this point, and you are responsible for the results. I'm not available to be your ATM or your scapegoat anymore. For my part, I'm excited for my new life in Seattle. I'm thrilled about the initiatives that await me at my company's renowned West Coast location. More significantly, I can't wait to create a life in which I'm respected for who I am rather than compared to someone else's golden child. Writing my last post from an empty condo, surrounded by stacked boxes, seems oddly appropriate. I start driving west tomorrow. I'll be looking back on my past life, with all of its suffering and familial strife. Yes, their baby was born last week, in case you were wondering. No, I haven't contacted anyone or seen any pictures. I've closed that chapter of my life. Again, I want to thank Reddit for supporting me over this trip. When I was having self-doubt, your encouragement and counsel kept me going. Anyone going through a similar situation should know that their value transcends their family's treatment of them. It's time to go. Cheers to fresh starts.